Reverse discards, hoovers, and the final symbolic loss. From both Vaknin's perspective and the MPIT framework, the experience described is not interpersonal. It is intrapersonal theatre, staged through the other. The narcissist does not return out of longing, and the victim does not suffer in response. Rather, what occurs is a mutual activation of internal object systems, colliding in a final symbolic ritual of reacquisition and collapse. Professor Vaknin teaches us that the Hoover is not about love, nor even nostalgia. It is a reflexive reassertion of ownership. It proves that the object is still within the narcissist's orbit, still animated by the gaze. The narcissist does not seek reconnection. She seeks confirmation of psychic possession. The Hoover is a test. Is the object still pliable, still loyal to the fantasy? If yes, the final act can begin. Discard by sacrificial narrative reversal. Within MPIT, the Hoover reanimates the redeemer ego in the victim, the part of the self that was built during childhood, to resolve rejection, idealization, and unrequited love. The self is not simply a people pleaser, it is a compartmentalized ego formation, animated by grandiosity and the fantasy of repair. When the narcissist returns, this part is summoned not just voluntarily, but structurally. The hall of mirrors lights up again. The return, a cold performance of affection. There is no intimacy in this phase, only performative residence. The narcissist mirrors back the fragments needed to keep the redeemer ego alive, just long enough to reverse the polarity. This is not reconciliation, it is preparation for symbolic inversion. Professor Vaknin teaches us that the narcissist cannot tolerate ambiguity. Closure must be obtained. The shared fantasy must be terminated on their terms, and their terms require the re idealization and then annihilation of the object. The re idealization is a cold empathy mechanism. It is not affective, it is a strategic calibration used to complete the story arc in a way that preserves the narcissist's grandiosity. Within MPIT, the victim's libidinal system remains partially active after the physical separation. When recontacted, it flares, but does so in a system still co opted by introjects. This creates a double inversion. The narcissist reasserts dominance by reenacting affection. The victim re engages by reanimating their false self, believing this time they will win. In reality, both are now tools of the fantasy system. Neither subject is fully present. What occurs is mutual depersonalization, each animating roles inscribed long ago. Devaluation, sacrificial staging, and narrative inversion. This is the core trauma. What the victim perceives as a reunion is actually execution theatre. Professor Vaknin shows that the discard must justify itself, the object must collapse, its suffering becomes the moral grounds for removal and the evidence of the narcissist's need to escape. The narcissist needs the target's collapse, but not simply as punishment, as a ritual justification. The performance of degradation is used as retroactive proof. See, they were unstable. This validates my departure and new relationship. This is not interpersonal cruelty, it is narrative cleansing. Within MPIT, the Redeemer ego, once reactivated, begins to override reality testing. The partner performs intimacy, ignoring the coldness. The interject loop of try harder, this is your last chance to fix it. This is the moment of reflexive, mirrored psychic inversion. The narcissist's cold withdrawal activates the internal death drive in the victim. They do not fall apart due to rejection. They fall apart because their entire symbolic structure, collapses under the weight of internal contradiction. The discarded object, not abandoned, but repurposed. The narcissist walks away not from a person, but from a completed story, and yet they leave behind not only absence, but a rewired symbolic architecture inside the victim. Professor Vaknin showed that the object becomes the evidence. The object's collapse proves my innocence, justifies my new supply, and allows me to cast the old object as morally and mentally unfit. Victim's collapse is converted into public relations capital. From within MPIT, this is not a discard, it is a symbolic annihilation. The interjects remain active, looping shame and hope. The false self remains animated for years, replaying scenes, seeking repair, even as the narcissist has emotionally moved on. This is why trauma persists long after the separation. The symbolic execution is still running internally. The victim isn't just mourning a relationship, they're trapped in a closed loop, replaying their own collapse within the narcissist's voice, now installed as the default narrative. The shared fantasy of death ritual. In both frameworks, the fantasy has to die, but for the narcissist, this means the partner must collapse. For the victim, collapse happens because the fantasy was the only thing holding the ego together. Vaknin gives us the architecture, mirroring, idealization, discard, mortification. MPIT gives us the lived mechanism, redeemer ego, interject co-option, symbolic collapse, and death drive inversion. Together they describe not a relationship's end, but a ritual execution performed by one, enacted by two, and authored by the fantasy itself. Peace out. Look to love.